Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about the 8th commandment of egoless code. So let's get into it. So the 8th commandment is fight for what you believe in, but accept defeat gracefully. And this is a bitter pill to swallow sometimes, but it is a very valuable thing to be able to do, because if you can't do it, you are going to find yourself with a lot of confrontations and a lot of problems on your hands. Let me explain. So in practice, we all know that your idea is the best. It's obvious for everybody. Now the problem is that since it's obvious for everybody that you are always correct, well, if you are correct and then your coworker is correct, or at the very least you both believe that you are correct, you are at an impasse. And that is a tricky situation when nobody's budging. Because when nobody's going to budge, fundamentally we find ourselves in a situation where the work cannot progress, and the purpose of you being in the company that you find yourself is pointless, because you can't, it doesn't matter how smart you are, because the work isn't being done. And that's something that I think many times it's very undervalued in many programmers' minds. It's this idea that just being smart or just producing good solutions or very clever solutions is the thing that matters. At the end of the day, that doesn't matter at all if nothing gets done. It's something that I've tried to hammer into the heads of everybody who is willing to listen, and that it is the simple truth that it doesn't matter if you are correct. It doesn't matter if you have a better solution if it doesn't produce results. I'm gonna say that again. If you can't produce results, nothing else matters. So when we accept that idea, that what the goal here is to produce results, I think that should give us a better perspective on this idea that we're always correct. Now, if you are 100% sure that you have the best solution, odds are that yes, you do. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that you are 100% correct, but the problem is that you lack the ability to get your coworkers to understand that. And I'm very sorry to say that in situations like that can be very frustrating, but in many cases, software development is a democracy. And I would like to call it an expert democracy. And what I mean by an expert democracy is that the person who has the perceived best idea or the highest value within the group is the person that most people will listen to. It's no different from any other office politics. So in other words, if you're a super senior developer with a lot of respect from the other developers, odds are that they're just going to default to your solutions if they're ever unsure. What's good about it, on the other hand, is that most people within IT do have an understanding of what you're doing, and a lot of the times it's kind of hard to get an objective, to have an opinion that isn't tied into an objective approach to something. Basically what I'm saying is that my experience is usually that since most developers have the ability to analyze a problem, they arrive at a very similar sort of solution. It's very rare that you have two very different solutions to the same problem. But when you find yourself in that situation where it doesn't have to be a vast difference, it can be like this tiny little, like, just, oh yeah, I want to do A and you want to do B, and you can't resolve that, that's a big problem. You should fight for what you believe in, because if you don't, you might get into a very different sort of behavior that is very destructive. The destructive part about not standing your ground comes when you lack the strength to do what is right. Because there's a difference between having something subjective happen that may just be correct, quote unquote. This is something that's very common within and this is the discussions that I usually just avoid, and I think you should too as well. When people say, oh, well, you should, I don't know, use double quotes instead of single quotes, or braces on wherever you put braces, you can put them wherever the fuck you want. These sorts of discussions are just, they at the end of the day, they don't produce any results. It doesn't matter if you do A or you do B, you can just pick one. It's completely arbitrary. So being like really religious and fighting over something that will not actually affect the end results all that much, that's not productive behavior. But it's very productive behavior if your manager comes in and says, well, we need you to do this and this and that, and you kind of go, well, that's not going to be a good idea. We really need to do this and that, because otherwise the code is going to suffer for it and it's going to be a real problem. And if your manager kind of frowns and says, well, how long is that going to take? And they get a little bit annoyed at you because the thing that you want to do is going to take longer than what they had expected, and they want you to give them a happy answer, which is basically just code for tell me what I want because that's the thing I want to hear. Now, as a developer, if you lack the strength to stand by your decision and say, no, we actually really need to do this refactor, or we need to fix this thing here that is a bug that has been problematic for a long time, if you never ever stand your ground, you will actually make the code worse. If you always fold, the code will at some point become a really, really big mess. And it happens quicker than you can imagine. Every single time you have to cut a lot of corners in order to achieve some deadline or something like that, you're basically adding to that depth. And that's where the good part about standing your ground comes from, this saying, if you ask me at the very least. You should fight for what you believe in, and trust me, you will have to fight. You will have to have this backbone to stand and say, no, I'm sorry, this is not going to work for me, or this is not going to work for the code. It's extremely important. Now, that's a good thing, but remember what I said. There's a difference between doing that and being this like kind of asshole who just says that no, who always wants to get their way, who regardless of what it is, just needs to have their way. And that's just not productive, because in some situations you are wrong, and even in some cases you're not wrong, but you cannot be right. Now that sounds weird, but as with the double quotes and the single quotes, you cannot be right. It's not possible. There's no benefit, like there's no clear benefit to doing one over the other. So fighting over the concept means that you're just fighting to get someone else to fold for no reason whatsoever. And there are more complicated and more intricate versions of this where it happens all the time. The other day I had a really stupid argument with one of my junior coworkers who took, I don't know how many back and forths we had over this idea. He refactored a symbol, a variable name within the code base, and since that symbol was used in quite a lot of places, it made a lot of diffs for when we went to the code review. And so he said, no, I want to move this into a separate code review and create a completely new pull request and a separate story card, because it takes you too long because there was other stuff that you needed to focus on, and you now need to it's going to dilute your focus from the main code. And I sat there and I said, yeah, sure, that might be some problem. It's nice that you think about me and all of this, but I really don't think that this is valuable. Like I can see the diff is like one line of code. It takes me less than a fraction of a second to just click through and say, okay, that was a symbol name that's changed. And I don't even mentally process it. I just go until I find something that is of interest. And we started like going back and forth and like, no, I really stand by my guns here, and I really think that this is important. And to me, this was completely ludicrous. Like, I'm like, why are you doing this? It's taking you longer to fight with me over this than it takes me to read through the code. So what we do in that situation is the thing that I think that you should do, and then you're taking a tiebreaker. You're taking another developer and you say, which is correct, which person is correct here? Should we create a separate pull request for this and like handle that as a separate thing, or should I just read the thing right now? Like, even for such a thing. And my my other coworker said, no, I think that this is kind of weird. And he stated the same thing that I stated. Well, because if you have 2 reviews for the same story, you're just going to add more extra process on top of doing this thing here and now when there's not really a problem here. And so he needed to fold. And he folded, and then we moved on. And with that, we are still friends, and like everything's fine, but he had to fold. So what I want you to take away from this is that you should stand by your guns, or stick by your guns, when you're dealing with a situation where you know for a fact that this is going to be very important. Like, there is a very tangible reason as to why you need to do this. You need to believe in yourself and your ideas, but you also need to be flexible enough to understand that sometimes you're outnumbered, and usually the democratic system is the best way, or at least the easiest way to resolve these sorts of problems. There are other ways to resolve problems like this, but that's a different video. But the heart and soul of this commandment is literally that. You need to have the backbone to fight for what you believe in, because if you don't, the system will suffer. And you have to have the empathy and the flexibility to understand when nobody's really hearing you out, and then you just have to move on, because otherwise you create this weird stalemate situation which is gonna get resolved, but you just cause damage and you don't really gain anything from it. Have a great day.